Are you ready, kids?
Aye, aye, Captain!
I can't hear you!
Aye, aye, Captain!
Oh!
Who lives on a pineapple under the sea? You all know who it is. It's Spongebob Squarepants. This cartoon has been running since the late 90s, and it doesn't seem like he's going to stop anytime soon. His popularity has only grown since his debut, and everyone knows of the happy-go-lucky fry cooking sponge. But I'm not here to talk about the cartoon. I'm here to talk about a SpongeBob game by the name of Spongebob Squarepants Battle for Bikini Bottom. Many people agree, myself included, that this is a really good SpongeBob game and one that any fan of SpongeBob should play. But as I replayed this game very recently, it occurred to me that there's a lot of unused content within this game, despite being a licensed third-party game which usually don't have very many things left in them. Because, surprisingly for a third-party game, there's a ton of things that were left out. So, today on the Beta Files, we'll be taking a look at SpongeBob Squarepants Battle for Bikini Bottom. Our first stop through this game's development has to do with several video clips taken by IGN. These videos are dated around March 15, 2003, meaning that this is a potential beta build of the game. First things first, it looks like several of the enemy robots have already invaded SpongeBob's house, as you can see there are hammer-type robots in the kitchen. And although it appears very briefly in the footage, on SpongeBob's chair there's a sundae based on the sundae in the episode Something Smells. What does it do? We'll get back to that later in the video. In the meantime, we can see that the shiny object icon for SpongeBob's HUD is different. Instead of a flower, it's just a purple box. This clip shows the inside of Squidward's house. It looks like Squidward's firmly grasping his clarinet in his hand, although it never shows up in-game. He's also wearing his Krusty Krab uniform hat for some reason. Maybe he just came from a night shift. Heading outside, we can see here that the toll gates used to block entry into the other parts of the Bikini Bottom hub world has a stop font on the shell. We can also see that the Krusty Krab is a bit more bleak this time around, with it being textured a bit differently, and it's currently missing the flags that are on top of the doorway. It seems it's pre-hibernation week, as Sandy's at Sound Mountain, with moves that are a bit different compared to her final game counterpart. The lasso has an added whooshing sound effect whenever she twirls it. Take a listen. As you might have heard, she also repeats "take that" every time she does her grappling attack. Another thing different about her grapple attack is that when she's targeting an enemy, there's a green arrow instead of the gloved hand in the final version. And here's where we see the first instances of shiny objects, and they implemented this generic crystal model as a possible placeholder. As Sandy starts to slide at this part in the clip, instead of bringing out the shell she usually surfs on in the show, she starts sliding on her tail. Although it is strange that Sandy is sliding on her tail because that looks, well, really painful to do and awkward to watch, I imagine this was a placeholder animation of some sort, as the animation looks similar to how SpongeBob slides with his tongue. Some of SpongeBob's moves have also changed, though in looks only. SpongeBob's bubble bounce attack uses shoes for the animation instead of feet, and his bash attack uses some sort of generic sports helmet compared to the Viking helmet used in the actual game. Finally, some aesthetic changes to the game. Firstly, Industrial Park is missing its biggest opponent, Robot Patrick. Instead, a bunch of regular enemy robots roam the battlefield. It seems as though you would have explored Kelp Forest in the daytime instead of the night, which matches the appearance of Kelp Forest in the episode Club SpongeBob a bit closer. Here we see SpongeBob respawning in Go Lagoon via Hans coming from the top of the screen, compared to the original game where he comes out from the sides of the screen. What's more interesting are the different designs of the stone tikis you can see on the right. They have a more ferocious design, I guess you can say, compared to the final game's design. When SpongeBob's on top of a lifeguard tower, you can see that the throw fruit for Patrick was originally a soccer ball, which we'll get back to that later. In the meantime, SpongeBob seems to have launched a bubble cruise missile at a distant robot, and there are some differences even just looking at this screen. For one, the screen usually has a reticle in the middle of the screen, and a timer for how long the missile will last. That's not the case here it seems, but even so, there's also an added distortion effect which does appear in the game, but only on the Xbox version. Let's head over to Jellyfish Fields where we can see SpongeBob doing his bubble bowl move. And for one, the bowling ball isn't a bubble, but, well, an actual bowling ball. Seems like the bowling ball can only hit one target as it only destroys one wooden tiki before it disappears. Patrick also seems to be having fun throwing around wooden tikis, but more importantly, he passes by this box that says Shiny Object Gate. This is obviously a temporary model for the shiny gate clams you see in the actual game, but there's actually another model for this box. More on that later though. Patrick in the meantime is showing off his standard attack, which at this point in the development was a headbutt. Which, I may say, looks really weird animation wise, and I can't even tell where the supposed hitbox for that attack is when he does it, which might be the reason why it was changed to a belly attack in the final game. Let's catch up to SpongeBob, and it seems our absorbent yellow friend is about to start sliding on the slide section of Jellyfish Fields. It seems as Larry is taking over Mermaid Man's spot though in this version of the game, as he's here standing at the beginning of the slide when he's supposed to be at the end of the slide, telling you to try again for the golden spatula on top of the rock. Now that might have been a lot of pre-released footage, but we're still not done yet. We still have 2 videos to go through, and both of them are trailers for the game. They're going to be shorter than the IGN ones, so let's quickly take a look at these trailers. This trailer mainly has some higher quality footage from the IGN video, except sometimes they're cut shorter than it. There are some different things not seen in the IGN video though, such as the Flying Dutchman graveyard in the background here, not being dark or nighttime. There's also this unused robot SpongeBob part of the boss fight that uses the anchor arms from the episode Musclebob Buff Pants. We'll come back to this unused boss fight later though, because there's a lot to talk about for this boss fight when we start looking through the actual files. At Goo Lagoon you can see SpongeBob running away, but looking in the distance, you can see an early version of the floating tikis. They seem to be pink, have red lips and wings, and emit smoke as they float. Robot Patrick seems to have finally taken residence in Industrial Park. However, the ice cream as well as his attacks aren't glowing with radiation like it does in the final game. Let's go indoors, not to visit Penny, Chip, and use Napkin, but look at the differences in SpongeBob's house. For one, the icon disappears quite fast, but the first frame of SpongeBob's house shows us this unused anchor icon. We never see what this icon is used for in the footage, nor in the final game. However, the icon does get used in Spongebob Squarepants the movie the game for Patrick's Macho Throw move. We can also see that hint signs are, instead of a question mark painted on the sign, it's a painted Gary on them. Kinda prefer this version of the sign because it gives it more character instead of being a generic sign. Here we see, wait, those aren't shiny objects, those are golden spatulas. I can only assume that this was a testing thing, as I somewhat doubt you were supposed to collect golden spatulas like shiny objects. Let's move on to the second trailer where we can see some more differences. For one, we can see the temporary shiny object model in more clarity. There's also the checkpoint font that is green, when in the actual game, it has a yellow font. Let's bring it around town to the last of the footages we have to look at, and it's this commercial, plus a sample video of the Xbox version. There's really only one thing that we can spot in this commercial that we haven't covered, and it's this different graphic of SpongeBob's help meter. Speaking of that help meter, Robot Sandy's had that same graphic, according to the Xbox sample video. Robot Patrick, on the other hand, looks like he's almost complete, except he doesn't have any sound effects at all. However, in this same scene, SpongeBob uses his bubble bounce attack that sounds differently when he lands it. Let's take a listen. The robot bosses aren't the only ones with different help meter graphics, because King Jellyfish also got the change. The kings seem to have seen that butter jars as health bars instead of the generic health bars seen for other mini-bosses in the final game. When Patrick uses the teeter-totter to launch himself over to the next platform in Jellyfish Fields, he twirls around a bit before landing, which is not seen in the final version. Now that we're finished with looking through some pre-released footage, better hop on that last bus before it leaves because we still have to go through the game's files to see what was cut from the game. And as per usual, if you want to take a look at some of the stuff I don't talk about in this video, such as the errors on this boot log, or these unused shelves that are hidden behind the wall in SpongeBob's kitchen, there'll be a link in the description of the video for you guys to check out. The first thing that goes unused in the game are actually some unused videos for the intro in the Xbox version of Battle for Bikini Bottom. But these videos aren't actually related to this game or even the SpongeBob series at all. Actually, these videos relate to the previous Heavy Iron Studios game they worked on, Scooby-Doo Night of 100 Frights. The two videos that were left from the previous game are the logo for the company itself, and even the intro for the game. During the opening intro of the actual game, it seems you can access an early version of the menu, at least in the GameCube version of the game. Ignoring the fact that the final game menu is overlapping the beta menu, we can spot some changes they made. For one, the jellyfish for the up and down arrows on the left side of the screen were originally pineapples in the beta menu. For the golden spatula icons that represent the missions of each level, they also use a different spatula icon. Instead of it being a rotating 3D model, it seems to be just a static icon of a spatula. The most interesting thing about this menu is at the very bottom, there seems to be a scrapped level called Glove World, which, obviously by the name, would have probably been a level based off of the Glove World theme park seen in the show. However, the concept of a theme park based level did make it into the game with the carnival at Goo Lagoon Pier, so it's possible that the Glove World ideas were incorporated into that part of the level. Ugh, barnacles. What stinks? Oh, it's just this Sunday I was talking about earlier. Like I said before, this Sunday was based on the Sunday from the episode Something Smells. By using a hex editor, we can trigger its effect by grabbing some more underwear health. It apparently makes SpongeBob and Patrick not only leave a trail of rancid breath behind them, but also move faster and have increased power too because they're able to destroy stone tikis with ease. This effect seems to only last roughly about 10 seconds though. Even though it seems to only have its use in destroying stone tikis, it's possible they removed this power-up because it does seem slightly overpowered. What's weird is that the Xbox version of the game has a slightly more higher resolution model, even though all versions of the Sunday go unused. I don't think that Sunday needed a higher resolution model, but this unused model surely does need one. As you can see, this model is of a pet worm for someone, oddly found in the files for Shady Shoals. Now, it could be based off of the pet worm SpongeBob had in the episode Dumped, but it's more likely that the worm belonged to Mr. Krabs as he had a pet worm too in the episode seen on TV. It's because there are 4 animation files tied to this model, 2 of which relate to idling, while the other 2 are a walking animation and an animation for being attacked. You can actually see this model in-game by switching the files for an NPC in Shady Shoals with the worms file, and it will try to play the model. But as you can see, the model is partially through the floor, and seems to have incomplete file animations because, well, the animation themselves look really broken. Speaking of NPCs, here's a model of a generic fish citizen of Bikini Bottom that goes unused. Judging by the way how she's modeled, it's possible that this citizen was going to appear in Goo Lagoon. This model of early shiny objects looks way different compared to the model used in the video footage, so those shiny object models in the video might have been the pre-alpha version of the model, while these are the actual beta models of the shiny objects. Now, it's said that this screenshot holds these beta models of the shiny objects, but I'm not totally sure about that, because to me personally, they resemble more of these shiny object models seen in the IGN footage. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. Collecting all these shiny objects means that we have to deposit them somewhere, doesn't it? So why not deposit them in this beta shiny object box? We can see straight away that this box is modeled and textured completely differently in relation to the other box we saw in the IGN footage or the trailer. This unused box is more colorful and more of a donation box design. This would obviously be replaced with the clams you see in the game. Maybe if we deposit enough clams, we can get Squidward's clarinet back, as it's still in the game's files. Yup, Squidward's beloved clarinet is still located inside the files for his model, and he still doesn't use it in the actual game. Hey, taxi! Well, that doesn't seem right. The textures on this taxi is different compared to the taxi used in the game. That's because this is actually the other half of the taxi. You see, the taxi and buses in the game use only half of the model. While the buses only have this half of the model in the game, the taxi model actually has its unused half in its files, which is the model you can see here. This exit sign was supposed to be seen near Sandy Mountain in the Bikini Bottom hub world of the game. Not really sure where you might have seen it because it says exit, and it wouldn't make any sense to see the sign near the taxi stop because that's the entrance to Sandy Mountain. Still an interesting model that went unused though. Early versions of certain models were left within the game as well. This includes the early version of the Thunder Tiki and the Flying Tiki. As I've stated before, the early version of the Flying Tiki is pink, has red lips, and, as seen in the IGN footage, emits pink smoke as they float. These Thunder Tikis look more angry compared to its final design because of its mouth and blue eyes. Gary seems to get around town very efficiently because his design from the IGN footage is still within the game. Obviously, these signs are meant to replace the now question mark signs seen throughout the game. Which, I will admit, I would have preferred to have this sign rather than the generic question mark sign in the final, but I guess it's not totally obvious what these signs entail, so it's understandable why they changed it. Question. Is a soccer ball an instrument? Well, no, but they were supposed to replace the watermelons used for Patrick's throw fruit. The model is still in the game and can even be seen in early screenshots. Last of the unused models are these models of the event button and the early version of the toll gate. The only things I have to say about these models is that the early button has a texture of the word push instead of the hand seen in the final game, and the early toll gate, like I said before in the pre-release footage, has the added words stop on its shell when the final toll gate has nothing on its shell. We could either talk about the unused textures or the unused text next. Let me just consult the Magic Conch Shell for advice. Oh, Magic Conch Shell, should I talk about the unused textures now?
No.
The conch has spoken! We'll talk about the unused text for now, and we'll come back to those unused textures afterwards. Let's talk about these unused item pickup names first. You can see that there's the unused text for the Smelly Sundae, but there's also pickup names for a bus ticket and a stall key. This stall key could hint at an item to unlock some sort of stall, perhaps this stall located in Kelp Forest. This unused bus ticket text is more fascinating though, because it could be related to the bus stops used to switch characters in the actual game. This could mean that there would have been a ticket you would need to find before you can switch characters at the bus stop. Similar to, say, collecting Mumbo tokens before you can transform in Banjo and Kazooie. Here's some unused text for the box office guy in Reef Cinema. Some of this text is actually used in-game, but the text after SpongeBob says, "One movie ticket, my good man," goes unused. Judging by how the box office guy responds, I'd say this text was meant to be used when you didn't have enough shiny objects to enter the theater. There's also some unused text that goes with Bubble Buddy for both inside of SpongeBob's dream and the actual Bikini Bottom hub world. This text describes characters floating above their houses, which obviously describes SpongeBob's dream. Judging by how the text is read, I'd say that it's possible Bubble Buddy was supposed to replace Gary, as he's the only NPC you can talk to in the level, and the fact that the text implies you should investigate the houses. While Bubble Buddy is usually cheerful and always willing to help SpongeBob, this unused text for the hub world version of the guy is a little bit hostile or just plain mean. I'm not really sure why the writers would write Bubble Buddy to be mean to SpongeBob, as I think he wouldn't do that, especially to SpongeBob. It's still an interesting bit of unused dialogue. The last bit of unused text actually relates to levels. Starting with these unused texts, you can see that this was meant for an E3 demo. One of these texts was possibly going to be on a sign and, as it shows, would tell you how to pick up throw food with Patrick. The other is just a generic thank you for playing text that was going to be shown when the demo ended. Surprisingly, there's more leftover things from the Scooby-Doo game, like these unused texts and this message saying to put the Scooby-Doo game back in the system. These unused texts actually relate to the levels seen in Night of 100 Frights, and are, for some reason, found in the game's executable. Now that we're done with these texts, it's time to see what kind of textures were left over, some of which relate to the early pre-release videos from before. Let's start with this texture of SpongeBob's underwear. Obviously, this is an early health icon from the game, and can be seen in the videos from before and early screenshots. The actual game uses 3D models of the underwear, while this icon is more of a 2D texture. The Krusty Krab isn't the Krusty Krab without its signature Krabby Patty, so it's weird that we don't even see it in game. Well, there's an unused texture of a Krabby Patty within the game's files. Not really sure what this could have been used for, but there's a chance this could have been used as a replacement for SpongeBob's health meter, as Spongebob Squarepants, the movie the game, uses Krabby Patties as its health meter. Speaking of that game, there's also another unused texture that relates to it. The same texture doesn't seem to have any purpose within the game, and you can see it even in the IGN footage. Yet, it does get used in the movie tie-in game as an icon for Patrick's Macho Throw move. There's a move meter that was going to be used in-game, and that is this soap bubble icon. This icon is possibly related to SpongeBob's moveset, as he does use bubbles for nearly all of his moves and could have been placed in SpongeBob's HUD because of that. Speaking of the yellow guy, there's an icon for him that comes in two colors, one in black and white and one filled in with yellow. There was probably something you had to activate or collect in order to have the black and white SpongeBob turn into the yellow filled icon. This icon used for SpongeBob's collected shiny objects might look like the same icon as in game, but don't get mistaken. This icon is actually a 2D texture, while the one used in game is a full 3D model. Remember that beta menu we took a look at before and its unused icons? Well, here they are in their full glory. As seen in the earlier footage, the pineapples were replaced with the jellyfish in the final game, and they were just used as icons for scrolling the menu up and down. The golden spatulas that were in the beta menu go unused too because the final game uses 3D models, while these are 2D icons. Now this texture is, well, kinda weird. This texture is actually some hidden credits hidden in the SpongeBob arena at the end of the game. You can see that this texture was never meant to appear in game due to how short it is, and, well, looks like a joke, but I still find it funny that it's still left within the game's files. The most interesting texture is this unused texture located within SpongeBob's own files. What is this texture? Well, it's clearly obvious if we took a look at its file name. chr_sb_musclearms.rw3.rwtx. Yep, these are the textures for the muscle arms or anchor arms that are used in the episode Muscle Bob Buff Pants. It's possible SpongeBob was supposed to receive some sort of anchor arms power-up or use it at some point in the game, because the texture is located within SpongeBob's own files. Part of this texture is actually used for Robo SpongeBob's eye, though the entire texture itself goes unused. All playable characters also have many unused audio files, some of which are early lines for boss fights or even relate to unused content. Since there are more than 5 audio files for each playable character, I'll only play the 3 that I found the most interesting for each of the characters. The first unused audio file for SpongeBob actually relates to the unused flying tikis.
It's almost too pretty to break. Almost.
It is actually used though if you use the cheat code that gives SpongeBob the bubble bowl earlier than usual. This audio was going to be used when SpongeBob would see Roboplankton for the first time.
As if the small version weren't enough.
And the last one I'll let you guys listen on is the original lines that SpongeBob was going to say before the start of the King Jellyfish boss fight.
Wow, King Jellyfish, the grandest granddaddy jellyfish of them all, and he's after me!
A lovable pink starfish could have also might have been able to fight King Jellyfish because this unused audio track tells us he's at the top of Jellyfish Fields, which is usually impossible to get to with Patrick.
Oh, don't look down, Patrick. Don't look down. Ah, I looked.
Apparently, Patrick could have also fought his Robo-self too, which is not seen in-game because he's not even in the cutscenes with Robo-Patrick.
Wow, I'm huger than normal today.
Patrick has also an unused line for when he and SpongeBob fight Robo-Sandy. It's a bit longer than any of the other lines he says in the cutscenes in the actual fight.
That's the biggest Sandy I've ever seen, except when she was hibernating.
Even Sandy was meant to fight her Robo-self as she also has an unused audio file for the fight, even though she never appears in any of the cutscenes or fight itself.
Well, don't that beat all!
Sandy also has another unused audio file relating to the beta flying tiki design, where she comments on the makeup of the tiki.
Way too much makeup.
Finally, she has an audio file for fighting Prawn in the Murmur Lair, even though SpongeBob can only fight Prawn, and she's not even a playable character in that level.
Prawn, I'm bringing you in!
There are 3 more audio files that we're going to listen to, and all of them relate to various sound effects. This sound effect file has the name patjumpland.snd, which gives us the hint that this sound effect was supposed to play when Patrick would jump and land, possibly from the Patrick teeter-totter from how it sounds. This audio effect is probably just a stock sound effect though, because it has been found in other games made by Renderware SDK, like Burnout 3 for example. This sound effect is named sb-plat2.snd, meaning this could be a sound effect that was going to be used when SpongeBob was going to bash something. Probably with his Bubble Bash move since, well, it is in the title of the move itself. This last unused sound effect is simply named tree.snd. Because of its name, it was supposed to be used when you would hit a tree. What tree exactly? I'm not sure because it could reference many tree-like items in Bikini Bottom, such as maybe Sandy's actual treehouse, or maybe a tree-like model in Kelp Forest. Either way, this sound effect goes unused, but it is reused in the movie tie-in game later on. There are various unused animations for some of the characters, most of them relating to the NPCs. The following characters have unused walking animations: Squidward, Mrs. Puff, Gary, Mr. Krabs, Bubble Buddy, Larry, Plankton, and Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy. The Mime and Sandy have animations for getting hit as an NPC. What's interesting is Sandy's animation, as she is an NPC in her tree dome, but this animation clearly has Sandy in her suit, meaning this animation is outside of the tree dome somewhere. That somewhere is inside of the chum bucket during the Robo SpongeBob boss fight, which I'll talk about later. Speaking of that fight, he and Robo Patrick also have unused idle animations for them. Robo Patrick has this unused idle animation where I believe he's insinuating you to fight him, even though that's what this boss fight is about in the first place. Robo SpongeBob, on the other hand, has this idle animation of him doing the wave. I'd say these animations were removed because there's really no reason for these robots to be idle when they could just attack you instead. Finally, let's go over the 3 unused levels that are still left within the game's files. First are the 2 early versions of Goo Lagoon. These 2 versions of Goo Lagoon are in the folders named New Folder and Working. They're surprisingly only dated 1 day between each other, with New being May 11, 2003, and Working being May 12, 2003. Considering they're only dated a day in between each other, there are a lot of similarities between them, so I'll just be focusing on the New Folder Goo Lagoon level. First off, it seems the hint signs still have that early Gary texture on them. And remember those early flying tikis that were in Goo Lagoon in the IGN footage? They seem to be still implemented here, floating around and even breakable. Some of the Thunder Tikis are also using their beta design, as seen here with the Thunder Tiki next to Larry. And the fish citizen that you bounce off of in the final game is colored more of a turquoise bluish color. In this scene, you might think that the throw fruits were not implemented yet into the game because it doesn't seem like anything's there. However, looking at this pre-release screenshot of the same scene, it seems that the throw fruits were still soccer balls at this point in the development of the level. The reason why we can't see the soccer balls now is because the script that makes the soccer ball appear is completely different from the watermelon model. However, it is known that Patrick can still pick them up and throw them, they'll just be invisible. Before SpongeBob pushes this button inside of the sandcastle, it seems like it's the regular button you see in the game. However, when he pushes it, the button actually changes into the early texture that says push. And finally, at the top of the sandcastle is where you enter the Goo Lagoon Sea Caves, where the gate is using the early model that has the words "Stop" on the shell. Some of you might remember SpongeBob's dream level and the fact that the level consists of going into other people's dreams, right? Although funny, wasn't it weird that Patrick's dream was just an empty void with him giving you a golden spatula just for talking to him? Well, just like Sandy, Patrick was supposed to have his very own level that he was going to explore, in which is only found on the GameCube and Xbox versions of the game. Now, the reason why the background of this level is, well, glitching up, is because this level naturally doesn't have a skybox background. But because I don't want to subject you guys to the headache of watching this footage like I did, I'll be referring to this other video where a modder has added a skybox to the level. When entering the level, Mrs. Puff will greet you there, and she even has unused dialogue relating to this level, stating that there's a golden spatula on top of the sundae in the background. And from that, you'll also obviously note that the aesthetic of this level is based around sweets and candy. Evidently, on the first platform after the Patrick teeter-totter, some cherries start falling down and were possibly going to roll around towards you as a hazard you would have to maneuver around. After going down a giant wafer stick and hopping across some ice cream cones, we arrive at the second platform where we can see many things. Firstly, there are some active tikis which, some of them are using their beta designs like the Thunder Tiki and the Flying Tiki. Also, there are a bunch of robots here, but they're currently inactive and they won't attack you. There are also a bunch of floating NPC characters like some children and Larry for some reason, as well as the Duplicatotron 1000 machine that the robots were going to come out of. While sweets and candy might be the main aesthetic of this level, there are some onions lying around the level, which seems bizarre for a level based on sweets. Yet when touching them, you would get hurt, meaning that these onions were going to be set up as some sort of hazard you would have to go around to get the golden spatula here, which is working and collectible. One of the last golden spatulas you would get is defeating Robo SpongeBob's brain in the second phase of the Robo SpongeBob boss fight. But that phase of the fight originally didn't take place inside of the brain of the robot, rather, you fought Robo SpongeBob outside with Patrick. As you can see, this is an unused phase with Patrick fighting the Robo SpongeBob that uses the anchor arms. Just like the early versions of Goo Lagoon, this boss fight was cut out entirely from the PS2 version of the game, but even so, this boss fight is usually unplayable as it crashes the game. If it's loaded in, it'll crash due to the broken collision files relating to the arms. Replacing these files with dummy files makes it somewhat playable. Emphasis on somewhat, because this boss fight can't be completed after a certain point. The fight consisted of Patrick throwing stuff, specifically the rubble surrounding him, to pop the anchor arms. Because of Patrick's ability to throw things, I can assume Patrick was the only character that was going to be able to fight at this phase. After popping both arms, well, like I said, this boss fight is unbeatable. As you can see, Robo SpongeBob doesn't have any weak point when both of his anchor arms are popped, so this is as far as we can go for this boss fight. While it makes sense for SpongeBob, Patrick, and Sandy to have Robo bosses because they are playable characters, concept art in the Reef Cinema shows one more Robo fight that one specific character would have also had a robot equivalent of. In the cinema, you'll find concept art of the game's development. These include the early designs of the Tiki shown before, early level designs, and even possible early costumes for SpongeBob, such as a Mermaid Man costume and Caveman SpongeBob. However, 2 pieces of concept art depict a boss fight with a robot version of Squidward. The first page of the artwork depicts SpongeBob having to maneuver around the robot's tentacles to hit this button. As depicted in this second page of the artwork, rocks would have crushed the tentacles, possibly from pushing the button from before. Because of that, the robot's head would have started firing some sort of disc at you, and, judging by the arrows, you would have to jump onto Robo Squidward's head to maybe use the Bubble Bounce attack to damage it. While this would have been a really cool boss fight to see in the actual game, the concept of Robot Squidward did still live on in some form. You can find Robot Squidward in the Game Boy Advance version of the game, and Robot Squidward would even be used again in the SpongeBob Truth or Square games, with the somewhat realized concept of dropping things to damage him, although it is a bit different compared to the original concept. And so those were the beta files of SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom. Like I said before, it's surprising to see so much left over from the development of this game within the game's files. From the leftover icons to even the unused Ink Arms boss fight, there's a lot of things that could have made the game more fun than it already is. However, despite the removal of those things, the team at Heavy Iron Studios still had a ton of
imagination.
The result from that and their hard work is, in my opinion, one of the best SpongeBob games you could ever play. With that being said, my name's NinFan237, and I'll see you guys next time.
He was number 1!
Hey, thanks for watching the video. Welcome to the end card, where I don't have a script and I'm gonna try and get through this as fast as possible because I'm trying to keep this video under 40 minutes. Hopefully. Anyways, so, you know, I'm just gonna say, you know, the usual things like, you know, follow me on Twitter, and then sometimes I stream on Twitch, so follow me there as well. And then subscribe and like or dislike the video or share it if you want to. It's up to you, really. Also, please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong about something or I misinterpreted something in the video, especially because I'm not the biggest SpongeBob aficionado, so I don't know, maybe I got some things wrong, or maybe I interpreted something wrong, so, there could be that, so, yeah, just correct me if I got something wrong. Anyways, so, here's where I would usually leave off with outtakes, but honestly speaking, I'm changing it up a bit. Because I decided that instead of, like, showing outtakes and just, like, my ramblings of, like, just recording flukes and stuff like that, I just decided to instead show, I guess, trailers for the next topic of the next, beta files, video. Because these videos take so long to make, and I feel like you guys need to like know like the next video that's coming up. That's me personally, though. I don't know if you guys actually like to, you know, listen to these outtakes or not. So let me know in the comments if you want me to revert back to them. But for this video, I'm just gonna leave you off with a trailer for my next video, and if you wait that long, you'll see the annotations for my previous video, which was about Super Smash Brothers, which was about Super Smash Brothers, and it was released during Smash Ultimate's release. Or if you can't wait for the trailer, then go click the top right card, I guess, right now. So yeah. Anyways, so I think that's about it. So my name's NinFan237. Thank you guys so much for watching, and here's the trailer for my next episode.